Hello, everyone. Before we dive in, be sure to drop your thoughts, feelings, and lessons in the comments below. Like the video and subscribe so you never miss stories like this. Let's get into it. Most people think a wedding is the happiest day of your life. Nobody tells you it can also be the day your whole world falls apart. My name is Danielle, and just hours before I was going to marry the man I loved, I found out a secret that broke my heart and made me want revenge. What happened next shocked everyone. Stay with me as I share my story from the beginning. I sat at the vanity in the bridal suite, watching the makeup artist dust the last bit of powder over my cheeks. The room was buzzing with voices, laughter, and the soft pop of champagne corks. At 27, I felt like I had finally reached the place in life I had always dreamed of. Steady job as a school counselor, close family, and today I was about to marry Malik. Malik was the kind of man people noticed instantly. Dark hair, perfectly styled, the clean, tailored look of someone who knew how to carry himself, and that easy smile that made everyone feel important when he looked at them. My parents adored him from the moment we had dinner together. My friends joked he could probably charm a stone wall into conversation. He was smart, thoughtful, and reliable in a way that made me feel safe. I used to tell people that with Malik there were no games, no second-guessing, just certainty. Simone, my maid of honor, was lounging on the couch behind me, one leg tucked under the other, swirling champagne in her glass. We had been best friends since the second grade, back when we both wore our hair in uneven pigtails and thought peanut butter crackers were fine dining. Over the years, she had grown into the kind of woman who could walk into any room and have every head turn. Long dark hair, perfectly arched brows, and that quick wit that made conversations feel electric. She had been with me through every heartbreak, job change, and late-night phone call I'd ever had. If there was one person I could count on today, it was her. The suite felt like its own little world. My bridesmaids were scattered around, some fixing their hair in the mirror, others taking selfies against the floral wallpaper. The smell of hairspray mixed with the sweet scent of fresh bouquets lined up along the window ledge. My dress hung nearby, the lace catching in the soft morning light. Every few minutes, someone would top off my champagne or hand me a small bite to eat from the pastry tray. I could hear my mom in the hallway, her voice just a little too loud as she gave instructions to someone about the table settings. And Aunt was fiddling with her hat in the corner, muttering about pins. Outside, the faint sound of guests arriving drifted up. Soft chatter, the shuffle of chairs, the distant laughter of children running on the lawn. It was exactly how I pictured my wedding morning. A blur of excitement, tradition, and love. Then I caught sight of Aunt Lorraine sitting in a velvet armchair across the room. She was watching me, not with the tear-eyed joy I expected, but with an expression I could not quite read. Sharp, almost assessing. She did not say anything, and when our eyes met, she gave the smallest smile before glancing away. I brushed it off, telling myself she was just overwhelmed by the day. Simone set down her champagne flute and stood, brushing invisible wrinkles from her dress. "I'm just going to check the flowers and make sure the musicians are set up," she said, flashing me a quick grin. "Do not mess up your lipstick while I am gone." I laughed, waving her off. "Go. I am fine." Malik was supposed to be getting ready with his groomsmen across the property. I imagined him straightening his tie, maybe cracking jokes to ease the nerves. The thought made me smile. For a moment, everything felt perfect. I had no reason to believe it would not stay that way. I was halfway through adjusting the hem of my dress when the wedding coordinator, a woman whose calm demeanor I usually found reassuring, approached me with a frown I did not want to see. "Danielle, have you seen Malik?" she asked, her voice low, careful not to alarm anyone yet. "No, why?" I tried to keep my tone light, hoping it was a silly misunderstanding. "He has not arrived for the pre-ceremony photos. I have tried calling and texting, but there is no answer," she said, her words landing like a weight on my chest. I froze for a moment, heart skipping. My mind ran through every possible explanation. Maybe he got held up with the groomsmen. Maybe traffic. Maybe no. No, I cannot let my thoughts go there. I picked up my phone and sent him a message, then immediately called. Nothing. The messages lingered with that small, cruel, delivered checkmark, but no reply came. I felt a tremor of unease. A tiny, sharp sliver of dread worked its way through me, twisting my stomach into knots. I tried to shake it off, telling myself to breathe, to stay calm. Maybe he was just running late. Maybe, maybe everything was fine. I glanced toward the doors leading to the ceremony hall. Guests were beginning to notice the delay. A few had glanced around, murmuring quietly among themselves, the gentle hum of conversation laced with curiosity. I could feel their eyes, or maybe just the awareness that something was not right. My chest tightened with every whispered question I imagined. I took a deep breath and tried to focus. Maya, my cousin, was hovering nearby with her ever-easy smile, though even she seemed slightly distracted. She leaned in casually, almost like it was nothing urgent, and said, "I saw Simone walking toward the estate's back wing about 20 minutes ago. Did not see Malik, though." Something in me stiffened at the mention of Simone, though I could not place exactly why. I forced my voice to remain steady. "Thanks, Maya. I will check it out." The decision to leave the bridal suite felt like stepping into a different world. Every step I took toward the estate's back wing seemed louder than it should have, my heels clicking against the floors like a warning. My breath came a little faster, each exhale sharper than the last. I passed by rows of flower arrangements and empty tables set for the reception. The silence of this wing felt strangely oppressive compared to the cheerful chaos of the main suite. My hand brushed against the wall for support, feeling the cold smoothness grounding me as I moved. I told myself to stay rational, to not jump to conclusions. Malik was here somewhere, surely. The farther I went, the more my unease grew. Doors that should have led to storage rooms or staff areas suddenly seemed like potential hiding places. I found myself pausing, listening for any sound. Footsteps, voices, the shuffle of movement. Nothing. I reached the end of the corridor and peered around a corner, scanning the back garden and service entrances. The space was empty. No Malik. No sign of Simone either. Only the gentle sway of leaves in the morning breeze and the faint echo of distant guests preparing for the ceremony I was supposed to walk into in minutes. My mind raced. Should I call the coordinator again? Should I try to gather someone to help me search? Or was it better to keep moving on my own? The uncertainty clawed at me, each unanswered call amplifying the pit growing in my stomach. I squared my shoulders, forcing myself to move. I cannot just wait. I had to find him before it was too late. I moved deeper into the estate, leaving behind the muffled noise of the main hall. The polished floors reflected soft pools of light from the antique sconces lining the walls, and each step I took sounded unnaturally loud in the quiet. My heels clicked like a metronome, counting down to something I did not want to face. The air here felt cooler, carrying a faint trace of lavender from the cleaning products the staff must have used earlier. I kept walking, scanning the closed doors on either side of the hallway. Most of them were unmarked, just simple guest rooms for overnight stays. I was about to pass another when a sound stopped me in my tracks. It was faint at first, just a low murmur, but then it came again. Laughter. Not the polite kind you share at a dinner party, but the easy, unguarded laughter that belongs to people completely comfortable with each other. My stomach knotted instantly because I knew that laugh. I had heard it countless times before across coffee tables and over phone calls. Simone. My chest tightened as I stood frozen in the hallway, straining to make sure I had not imagined it. Then another voice joined hers. This one was deeper, familiar in a way that made my pulse spike. Malik. I stepped closer, my breath catching as the sounds became clearer. Soft words, a quiet chuckle, then the rustle of movement. I pressed my ear to the smooth wooden panel, every muscle tense. Snatches of conversation slipped through, fragments of sentences too quiet to fully piece together. But their tone was unmistakable, intimate. I did not want to believe what my own senses were telling me. My hands curled into fists at my sides, as my heart pounded hard enough to drown out the rest of the world. For a moment, I thought about walking away, pretending I had heard nothing and letting this moment disappear. But my feet refused to move. A sudden shadow passed across the far end of the hallway, and I straightened quickly. It was a housekeeper balancing a small basket of toiletries. She glanced at me with mild curiosity. Then her gaze shifted to the door I was standing near. "I left something in there earlier," I said, forcing my voice to sound casual. My words came too quickly, thin as paper, but she did not question it. Instead, she reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a spare key, pressing it into my palm without hesitation. The cool metal felt heavier than it should. I swallowed hard, my fingers trembling as I fitted into the lock. Every click of the mechanism sounded like a drumbeat echoing through my chest. For a second, I just stood there, my hand resting on the doorknob, knowing that whatever I found inside could change everything. Then I turned it. The door eased open on silent hinges, and the scent of warm skin and perfume hit me before my eyes even adjusted. My gaze moved to the bed, and the world seemed to narrow to a single sharp image. Malik, Simone. They were tangled together in the sheets, limbs entwined in a way that left no doubt about what I was seeing. Both of them froze at the sound of the door, their faces snapping toward me. For a moment, there was no sound at all. No explanation, no apology, just the heavy, suffocating silence of being caught. For a long moment, I could not move. The air between us felt electric, charged with a betrayal so raw it made my skin crawl. My mind fought to process what I was seeing, but every rational thought seemed to crumble, leaving only a hollow ache in its place. My chest tightened, but I did not let it show. Not yet. Malik's mouth opened, then closed, as if he were trying to form words, but none came out. His usual confidence had evaporated, replaced by the fumbling stammer of someone caught in a trap they never imagined. Simone scrambled, yanking her dress over herself with hurried, trembling hands, her eyes wide and guilty. I watched them, a silent observer in a scene that should have been my nightmare. But somehow I felt suspended above it, untouched. I did not respond. I did not speak. My lips pressed into a thin line. My face, an unreadable mask that revealed nothing of the storm raging inside me. I studied them. The fear on Malik's face, the desperation in Simone's eyes. For a fraction of a second, I allowed myself to feel everything, to feel the betrayal like a sharp blade against my ribs, but I did not let it control me. Then I turned. Not a word, not a glance backward. I simply stepped away, my heels echoing softly on the polished floor as I moved down the hallway. The sound seemed to mark the rhythm of my resolve, each step reinforcing a decision I had made without thinking. I felt their panic like a presence behind me, but I did not falter. Their shock was a mirror to the calm settling over me, a calm that felt strange, almost intoxicating after the chaos I had just witnessed. The corridor stretched out in front of me, empty and quiet, except for the faint hum of air conditioning. I could hear distant voices from the main hall, the chatter of guests who had no idea what had just happened mere rooms away. It was almost surreal, walking through a space filled with ordinary sounds when my world had just been upended completely. Tears had started to blur my vision earlier, but now they dried almost instantly, replaced by something sharper, a dangerous calm. I felt it coil around me like a tightly wound spring, ready to release. Not in anger yet, but in purpose. I realized I no longer needed to plead, argue, or beg for explanations. That chapter had closed the instant I saw them together. I passed a window and paused briefly, looking out at the manicured gardens of the estate. The early sunlight caught on the dew, sparkling as though mocking the ugliness I had just encountered. I inhaled deeply, letting the air fill my lungs and clear my head. The world outside seemed bright and calm, oblivious to the storm that had erupted inside these walls. And in that contrast, I felt a strange clarity. No words were necessary, and none were offered behind me. I could feel the weight of their panic, the desperate realization of what they had done, but I did not glance back. That power, the quiet assertion that I would not be reduced to tears or confrontation, was mine alone. Each step carried me further from betrayal and closer to a decision I knew I had to make. By the time I reached the end of the corridor, the calm had solidified into resolve. It was cold, precise, and unyielding. My life had shifted in one instant, and I would not stumble in its aftermath. Not for them. Not for anyone. I pushed open the door at the end of the hall, leaving behind the remnants of what I had once thought love, and stepped into a new space where I would define the rules. I slipped into the privacy of my locked dressing room, the click of the bolt behind me sealing me off from the chaos outside. The quiet was a balm, though it also sharpened every thought racing through my mind. I picked up my phone and dialed Terrence's number, my fingers steady despite the storm inside me. "Terrence," I said when he answered, my voice calm, even. "I need your help. Can you gather a few people in the reception hall?" 15 minutes. Everyone I tell you to. No questions. His voice held surprise, a flicker of worry, but he did not argue. I could hear the shuffle of his feet as he moved to obey, and a tiny spark of satisfaction ignited in me. I was orchestrating the next move now, taking control of the narrative rather than letting it sweep me away. I hung up and set the phone down, letting a moment of silence wrap around me. Then I turned my attention to the mirror. My reflection looked back at me, eyes wide, cheeks flushed, lips slightly parted. For a heartbeat, I let the vulnerability of the moment linger. Then I began to rebuild. First the lipstick. I applied it slowly, deliberately, each stroke a reaffirmation of control. The bold red color was not just for appearances. It was a declaration. I smoothed my veil carefully over my shoulders, making sure no crease betrayed the earlier turmoil. Every detail of my gown was adjusted, folds and pleats straightened until the fabric lay perfect against my skin. The mirror reflected a woman poised, confident, and composed. No tear stains, no trembling hands. Every hint of hurt had been tucked away, replaced with a careful, controlled facade. I studied that face for a long moment, committing it to memory. This version of me would be the one the world saw, the one who could execute the plan I had forming in my mind. The idea had crystallized quickly once I allowed my thoughts to focus. Sharp, clear, irreversible. It was not about revenge in the petty sense. It was about reclaiming the narrative that had been stolen from me in the most intimate, personal way imaginable. I was not just reacting. I was planning, constructing a course of action that would leave no room for missteps. I pictured the reception hall, the unsuspecting guests seated and waiting, unaware of the storm about to unfold. Every face, every detail was part of the mental blueprint I held. Terrence would bring them in. I would reveal what needed revealing in the way that ensured maximum clarity and minimal chaos, at least from my side. Everything else would follow naturally once the truth landed. I glanced at my reflection again, calm, composed. Every ounce of distress hidden behind practiced poise. The thrill of command surged quietly but insistently beneath the surface, and I let it anchor me. The plan was not just about exposing them. It was about showing that I would not be the victim. Not today. Not ever again. I checked my watch. 10 minutes until Terrence would return with the first of the guests. I breathed deeply, letting the rhythm of my inhalation and exhalation steady my heartbeat. Each moment brought me closer to execution. The nerves that had gripped me earlier were gone, replaced by precise anticipation. Finally, I allowed a tiny, controlled smile to touch my lips. Everything was ready. The world outside might still be unaware, the deceit hidden in plain sight, but I held the power now. Every move I had made, every decision in the last hour had led to this point. And when the time came, the plan would unfold exactly as I intended. The shuffling started before I even reached the microphone. Guests whispered to one another, eyebrows knitting in confusion. The usual rhythm of a wedding day, the music, the ceremony, the anticipated walk down the aisle, had been disrupted, and I could feel their curiosity ripple through the crowd like a wave. I did not rush. I let them stew in it for a moment, letting the tension build, letting the uncertainty settle in. I stepped up to the microphone, my heels clicking softly against the floor. The polished wood beneath my feet reflected the soft glow of the reception lights, but I barely noticed. All I felt was the clarity of the moment, the certainty of the position I'd chosen. I looked out over the crowd, taking in familiar faces, friends, family, colleagues, all waiting, watching, unsure. Thank you all for coming today. I began, my voice calm and deliberate, carrying easily through the tent. I know this is not what any of you expected, but I promise it is necessary. What I have to share is more important than any vows, more important than any ceremony. A ripple of murmurs moved through the audience. I could see their heads turning, their eyes searching, scanning for Malik or Simone, but neither appeared. The absence was almost theatrical, perfectly timed by circumstance, or perhaps by my careful orchestration. Either way, the emptiness added weight to my words, and I let it linger. I could feel a subtle shift in energy, a tension threading itself through the crowd. Their confusion and curiosity were palpable, tangible. They leaned in slightly, unconsciously drawn closer to hear, to witness, to understand. This was my stage now, and I let the stillness carry my presence, my resolve, my control. Then, as planned, Terrence appeared. I had not needed to glance at him to know he was coming. He wheeled in the small projector and laptop, a quiet efficiency in his movement that mirrored my own. He set it up near the front of the tent, cables snaking neatly across the floor while guests craned their necks, trying to piece together what was happening. I gave him a subtle nod, our silent signal that the next phase was ready. The projector's lens whirred softly, casting a dim glow over the screen. I could feel the crowd's attention tightening, their anticipation building. In that quiet moment, I realized how fully I had captured control of the narrative. The power was no longer abstract. It was physical, present, immediate. The microphone in my hand, the projector ready to reveal truths, the audience held in suspense. It was all exactly as it needed to be. I allowed my gaze to sweep over the crowd again, catching glances of familiar faces, measuring reactions, sensing the curiosity and tension like a living pulse. They had no idea what they were about to see, no inkling of the revelations about to unfold. That ignorance was crucial. I wanted them to feel the weight of truth without mediation, to watch the impact, to witness the consequences of betrayal firsthand. Every detail, every movement in that moment mattered. Terrence's hands hovered over the laptop, ready to press play. I adjusted the microphone slightly, feeling the power of silence stretch out before the first image illuminated the screen. The guests leaned forward collectively, the murmurs quieting, their eyes fixed. The moment had arrived. The truth was about to speak, and I was the one holding the stage. I breathed in slowly, letting the anticipation settle into a steady rhythm, and for the first time since the morning, I allowed myself a private, quiet satisfaction. The plan I had crafted so meticulously was unfolding perfectly. Trust, I began, my voice steady, measured, is not something we give lightly. Loyalty is not something that should be broken without consequence. The words hung in the air, deliberate and pointed, as I glanced briefly at the sea of faces before me. Each one of them leaned in a little closer, their curiosity and tension thickening. I pressed the remote in my hand, feeling the subtle click beneath my thumb, and the large screen flickered to life. Security footage appeared, grainy but unmistakable. There was Malik, smiling, confident, unsuspecting, as he slipped down the hallway. Simone followed, her expression smug, almost triumphant. The scene was simple, mundane even, but the implication was devastating. A murmur spread quickly through the audience, growing into sharp gasps and whispered questions. People shifted in their seats, some standing entirely, craning their necks to get a better view. Faces that had been warm and celebratory moments ago now registered disbelief, confusion, and a creeping sense of betrayal. I held their gaze calmly, letting them feel the weight of the moment without adding a single exaggerated gesture. The footage continued, capturing the brief but undeniable moment when they entered the guest room, the door closing softly behind them. It was brief, almost incidental, yet it said everything. I could see people exchanging glances, some whispering to neighbors, trying to process what they were witnessing. The denial was already beginning to crumble in real time. I clicked forward, revealing more angles, more snippets, enough to erase any shadow of doubt. Every movement, every glance, every subtle expression was evidence that could not be ignored. The reactions around me intensified. Hands flew to mouths, eyes widened. Some leaned forward with disbelief. Others slumped back, speechless. The truth was raw, undeniable, and it pierced through every polite social facade the wedding had tried to maintain. I raised my voice slightly, narrating with a precision that left no room for ambiguity. This is not hearsay. This is not speculation. This is what happened, plain and simple. I let my words sink in, measured and deliberate, giving each guest the time to absorb the images before moving to the next clip. My tone remained calm, almost clinical, because I knew any display of anger or hurt would distract from the evidence. My purpose was clarity, and clarity demanded restraint. Some faces crumpled in shock, others tightened in quiet anger. I noticed a few guests fidgeting, some whispering, trying to rationalize what they were seeing, but the visual proof was undeniable. Each frame I showed was a testament to betrayal, and every guest had to confront it, whether they wanted to or not. I paused, letting the footage fade, leaving a still image on the screen. Silence stretched heavy and thick as the weight of the truth settled over the reception hall. I could see Malik's absence everywhere. Simone's absence, too, both replaced by the echo of their actions in the minds of everyone present. I spoke again softly, deliberately. Actions speak louder than words. Loyalty is not negotiable, and trust, once broken, does not simply heal because someone claims it should. My words carried through the tent, cutting through the stunned quiet, final and undeniable. I lowered the remote, letting the audience sit with the reality I had laid bare. The images, the narration, the calm certainty in my voice, it all converged into one simple truth. There was no room for denial, no chance to argue, and no way to escape the consequences of what they had done. I did not flinch as the door to the reception tent slammed open. Malik stormed in, his face red with anger, chest heaving as he shouted for me to stop. I kept my gaze steady on the screen, letting his fury ripple through the crowd while I remained unmoved. Behind him, Simone appeared, her face pale, eyes wide with panic, clutching at her dress as if it could somehow shield her from the judgment in the room. They tried to speak, their voices urgent, demanding explanations, apologies, anything to regain control, but the reaction of the guests made their words meaningless. Murmurs had already grown into sharp exclamations of outrage. I could feel the energy in the room shift, a tidal wave of disbelief and anger sweeping over everyone present. Attempts to rationalize or defend themselves were swallowed whole by the weight of what had just been revealed. I watched quietly as Simone's parents stepped forward, their expressions taut with humiliation and disbelief. They grabbed her arms, pulling her aside in a firm, almost violent motion. I could hear snippets of their anger, sharp words that pierced the tense air, words that made it clear there would be no forgiveness, no excuses, no reprieve for what had happened. Simone tried to protest, stammering, but the disbelief in their eyes shut her down completely. Meanwhile, Malik's groomsmen shifted uncomfortably, avoiding his gaze. Some lowered their heads, shaking them slowly, a silent acknowledgement of disappointment and disgust. They had seen him in a different light, the charming, reliable man they thought they knew, and now they were confronted with his duplicity. The camaraderie they had shared in earlier celebrations now felt hollow, a fragile illusion crumbling under the weight of truth. The murmurs and gasps from the guests grew louder, a chaotic mix of sympathy, disbelief, and quiet judgment. I could sense the shifting alliances, the subtle recalculations happening in real time. Everyone present was processing, and every glance toward Malik and Simone carried its own verdict. The social masks they had so carefully worn were stripped away, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. I allowed a pause, letting the room absorb the full impact of the revelation. My voice then returned, calm but firm, cutting through the tension like steel. "There will be no wedding," I said, letting each word land heavy and deliberate. I could feel the weight of the moment settling in every corner of the tent, every gaze fixed upon me. I did not need to shout or plead. The truth itself carried the authority. I lifted my eyes to the crowd, taking in their expressions, shock, relief, anger, and even a few tentative nods of respect. They were witnessing not just a wedding undone, but the collapse of carefully maintained pretenses, the unveiling of truth that had been hidden behind smiles and polite greetings for far too long. Every guest present was now part of this reckoning, and no one could ignore it. I let a final sentence hang in the air, measured, precise. But at least now there is truth. The words were not bitter. They were not triumphal. They were simply undeniable. In that moment, I felt a strange clarity, a quiet release. The facade had fallen, the illusion shattered, and though the room buzzed with murmurs and unrest, I felt nothing but a steady, resolute calm. Malik's shouts had faded into the background. Simone's protest silenced, and the truth, my truth, stood at the center, unchallenged and undeniable. I did not need more. I moved through the crowd without hesitation, letting my gown brush softly against my legs with each step. The swish of silk echoed in my ears, a steady, rhythmic reminder that I was leaving, not in panic, but with purpose. Guests parted from me as I passed, some offering sympathetic glances, others unable to hide their stunned fascination. The energy in the tent shifted with each step I took, a mix of admiration, shock, and relief following in my wake. Aunt Lorraine appeared at the doorway, as if she had been waiting just for me. Her eyes, sharp and discerning as ever, softened for the briefest moment. She pressed a set of vintage car keys into my palm, their weight reassuring. No words were necessary. Her gesture spoke volumes. I nodded slightly, understanding everything she did not need to say. The keys were more than metal. They were trust, support, and the freedom to leave everything behind. Terrence followed closely, a quiet presence beside me. I felt the steady thrum of his protective energy as he stayed a step behind, alert to any disruption, any threat. His silence was a comfort. It anchored me in the reality of my own control. I did not need him to speak. His mere presence reinforced that I was not alone, that someone who truly cared for me understood the gravity of what had just happened and had my back. Photographers who had been hired for the day's celebrations now captured something entirely different. Cameras flashed as I made my way toward the exit, documenting my composure, the grace in my movements, the subtle strength in the tilt of my chin. I did not pause, did not pose. I simply moved forward. Every picture a testament not to the celebration that had been planned, but to the assertion of my own dignity and autonomy. I could almost feel the shutter clicks translating into whispers among the crowd. A silent record of the moment, I chose myself over betrayal. Stepping outside, the cool air hit me, a crisp contrast to the tension lingering in the reception hall. The world felt larger now, unbounded by the chaos I was leaving behind. Malik and Simone remained trapped in the wreckage of their own making, confined by the consequences they had ignored until it was too late. I did not look back. There was nothing for me in their panic, no satisfaction to be gained from their humiliation. My focus was forward, on the open road, on the clarity that stretched beyond the walls of that tent. Sliding into the driver's seat, I felt the comforting grip of the steering wheel beneath my hands. I inhaled deeply, the air scented faintly with the flowers that had been so meticulously arranged inside. The engine's purr was steady, reassuring, a tangible symbol of motion and momentum. With a deliberate push, I drove away from the life I thought I wanted, leaving behind the shattered illusions of Malik and Simone, the murmurs of the guests, and the chaos of a wedding undone. Through the windshield, the venue receded into the distance, a reminder that some chapters close abruptly without ceremony or fanfare, but that does not diminish their importance. I drove with nothing but intention, nothing but resolve, and the knowledge that while they faced the consequences of their choices, I had claimed my own freedom, untouched, unshaken, and undeniably myself. The road ahead was open, wide, and uncharted, but for the first time that day, it felt entirely, irrevocably mine. Weeks had passed since the chaos of the wedding, and the aftermath was undeniable. Malik's reputation lay in tatters. Word of his betrayal spread quickly through the community. Former colleagues whispered behind his back, clients canceled meetings, and his carefully curated image of charm and reliability crumbled before everyone's eyes. Simone's fall was quieter, but no less definitive. She resigned from her job and moved out of town, leaving behind the life she had once so effortlessly controlled. As for me, I needed a space that was entirely my own. I moved into a modest apartment, a place where every corner reflected my choices and nothing reminded me of the betrayal I had endured. Here I could breathe, think, and start over on my terms. Each day was a small victory, arranging furniture, cooking meals just the way I liked, and reclaiming the routines that belonged to me alone. One afternoon, Aunt Lorraine stopped by. She studied me with her sharp, approving eyes and said, "You have shown extraordinary strength, Danielle. Not everyone could have walked away the way you did." Her words were not just comfort. They were a recognition of everything I had endured and overcome. In that moment, I realized that rebuilding was not about forgetting or pretending it had not happened. It was about honoring my resilience, acknowledging my pain, and stepping fully into my own life without fear. The fire that tried to consume me had only cleared the path for me to stand taller, stronger, and more certain of myself than ever before. The world had not written my ending. I had, and I intended to live it fully on my own terms without looking back. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.